Good day. I'm Joonsik from Seoul, South Korea. I'm working as a DevOps engineer in Samsung Electronics. We are doing lots of things, but these days I'm working on make service efficiency using IIC Terraform. I and my colleagues have been doing Terraform since a couple of years ago. We got some tips to think about in process applying the Terraform. All these things are from the perspective view of us. I'll share these basics for someone who having trouble using the Terraform for their projects. The way you utilize cloud provider that are only used by VMs is an old story and intertwined with the various cloud services and architectures even within one big project. Let me introduce projects what our team have done. Bixby is a huge customer AI assistant service. It is used around our world through the various Samsung devices. And B2B service, we call it Knox, is serve a variety of the corporation needs. RCS is a large-scale service that delivers the rich content to customers through the messages with the carriers. As a feature of this service, the over 60 million users in over 10 environments built using the Terraform and over 10 development and operation teams integrated and various service and architectures over there, the VM only and container and serverless. And then also we had a multi-cloud and infrastructure as a code by all Terraform. So why Terraform we choose? The technology evolved to reduce the people mistakes. The infrastructure written in code become a great receipt of the infrastructure build process in a sense. So there are benefits to use infrastructure as a code. IAC help reduce the human error. We'll be able to collaborate smoothly with the various people. And these results provide a clear understanding of the current infrastructure. The clear infrastructure is abstracted and used on object closely linked to services. That means we can take the same approach to infrastructure and service. While the infrastructure as a code person in charge is changing, the infrastructure maintenance become easier than before. It will also be able to design so that it can be reused for the future new projects. That we can call it reusable. We must care not only infrastructure as a code, but also how can we work together to maintain integrity between infrastructure and code. Among additional issues that come to mind when you do real project is how to work with your infrastructure as a code among other teams. And there were times when we had to build a new, unexpected environment in a short time. Sometimes we had to design a new service on top of existing legacy network design Terraform, such as create a new service infrastructure on existing network was composed of complex Terraform codes link multiple private network. We can handle it easily. So when we design the infrastructure of the project, we need to consider various cloud providers. It has a different accounts, regions, environments. In addition, the shape will vary depending on whether service architecture is a VM only or serverless or container based. In more detail, it may even be necessary to consider distinguishing between area where the structure of the working department and code should be changed frequently and not. I think those are the problems that need to be solved through the design of the Terraform workspace and module. So I think workspace should be properly divided so we can call it well-grained. And I think the important thing is the who is working on the Terraform and what for, and dependency relate with the states. So because Terraform organizes all the resources in the directory into the single workspace state, modifying a large workspace is expensive as browsing through the large folder to find a desired file. As a small and clear workspace, Terraform becomes as concise as there are only a few files an open folder. That folder represents the resources written in the files. Let's look at the yellow part. That is what we try to modify using the Terraform. If you try to use the monolithic workspace design, your Terraform work browse to find out yellow part over the one big state. But if you choose a well-grained workspace design, your Terraform work browse to find out your yellow part as much as a small state. Also, well-organized workspace design loosely coupled. To clearly prevent causing change to resources unrelated to the purpose of the changing infrastructure. So, I think most important thing in the designing Terraform is who is responsible for changing is the infrastructure. Organization structure in real world is most important factor, I think. This is because changes the development team's organization will result in the changes in services, and changes in the services may cause changes in the infrastructure again. Designing these kinds of thinking in advance reduces the amount of work to be done later on. And if only one DevOps team exists in one office, that could be solved through the conversation. However, if team that is getting harder to talk to in other office work together, considering the role of the people who have to use their infrastructure, it is necessary to think about how to work with the various team. We can design the deeper the folder is, the more dependent it is on the parent folder. It is designed so that the change in the inside that is frequently changed does not affect the parents as much as possible. As you can see, the whole infrastructure dependency is revealed under the single folder. And reference the resources can be clearly identified at each state, but there's drawbacks. The folder structure is too deeply nested and hard to understand the entire infrastructure by who just got into the DevOps team. I prefer distributed design for Workspace. If you do separate repositories for the purpose, let me for example, if EU DevOps start to manage Service A's infrastructure only, we can suggest to manage the service vertically regardless of the environment. And then EU DevOps only care about the repository 3 for the Service A. But KL DevOps teams cover all of the repository for the global infrastructure. So what I want to say, the permission to modify is given according to the appropriate role for each team. That is important thing. And there is a data type in the Terraform. Data type refer directly to resources created on cloud providers. Terraform code is one of the ways to create resources for the cloud providers. And if data type refers to the resources themselves, it won't have a directory dependency on existing Terraform code. This approach is also worth considering when you're working with an organization that make other decisions, but you have to be careful because of the network infrastructure would be changed. Consider using network infrastructure from other organizations that have already been made of Terraform. We couldn't erase it and make it new. But we could revert to the combination of the complex existing Terraform codes. At the time, the data type Terraform can be a little help. The data type based on unique ID network refers to the resource created on the cloud directly. And this approach is also worth considering when working with an organization with different decisions in real enterprise. There is not much of the problem if the only one team in your local place. However, imagine United States, South Korea, and India, and EU, and China. DevOps teams work together in same repository to build infrastructure for own environment in the same time. Managing infrastructure as a code naturally becomes difficult. I think certain rules for workflow are necessary to solve this problem. So it's workflow that must be observed by all members responsible for infrastructure as a code. There are ways to use Git, an open source tool, and there is Terraform Enterprise. The infrastructure as a code usually managed through the Git we are familiar with in order to prevent inconsistency between infrastructure and the Terraform state. The basic policy of the applying Terraform after being merged in the main branch should be applied. Usually main branch is a master, right? Because plan does not affect the state, it is good to attach the plan to each PR or create idea of the infrastructure shape itself through the review. If you have any interest in the open source tool, Atlantis, I believe you already know that. If you make some PR, you can type into the Atlantis for attach what you try to modify infrastructure. And the person who tried to review your pull request is much easier than looking at code. Terraform Enterprise is a paid service that can solve a lot of problems. And as much you pay, various convenience and features are provided. The remote state management and recess integration with the GitHub, and enforce the Terraform policy, and user management and history management. If you're not offered to, it is important to manage the remote state by yourself. Consideration is given to synchronization in order to ensure the transaction in case of multiple people working. It is state that encrypts the entire contents of the infrastructure. At the time, we need state encryption and synchronization by the cloud providers. The composition of the complex modules becomes the biggest enemy of those responsible for entering Terraform. Infrastructure that should be clearly seen rather than creating various resources with single modules with a complex conditional statement. It is better to make several modules with a clear purpose different from the environment to environment. Terraform cannot be added when the attribute of the resources are not defined in the module. Therefore, it is recommended that the value of the attribute be defined first as a default value in the cloud provider column for reusable of the future function. I recommend you design open source rather than starting the background. And please consider what attribute would change. I think the biggest potential advantage of Terraform is a design of the project using the various providers. The providers is written by Golang, and there is no dependency on the toolchain, a prerequisite package on their stand for. So the integrate design and management various software layers and tools except for the code level of the service, as well as infrastructure as a code enables a high level of clarity. If the Kubernetes cluster consisting of the server cloud providers established all metric, alarms, and even deployments distributed in the process are managed as a Terraform, it is expected that higher quality service will be possible based on this. When designing multi-cloud, you should review each function before you work on. Similar function may differ the structure of the different clouds and folders due to their dependencies. And the shape of the code will be different, so it is better to distinguish it according to it. At last one, quote from the Conway, which department is organization we work on Terraform. Due to nature of a company, there may be changes in your work team. Considering that the design and working style of the infrastructure can vary with the change of the organization, I think we can manage more the flexible better than infrastructure as a code. Thanks for watching.